Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Marcus from Marcus Brown Performance, also the owner of Dad Strength. Make sure to get your official Dad Strength headwear at officialdadstrength.com, where strength is rooted in fatherhood. So I saw a video online from this YouTube creator that I follow and I watch a lot. His name is Presser Powerlifting, and he talked about why he hates the USAPL. And I wanted to respond to that video and give my take on what he said, my critiques, and sort of challenge and rebuttal what he was saying. So I'm gonna go piece by piece and break down what he said, and then also just give my response. So let's get to it. So the first thing he mentioned was that the USAPL ruined the sport. And obviously he was being sarcastic with that, but he was being, somewhat serious as well, of course. He mentioned how the main reason was the split between the IPF and the USAPL because of the drug testing, right? And the USAPL does have a different mission when it comes to drug testing. That's one of their main things that they prioritize when it comes to their federation. However, the main thing that I think gets missed in his argument is the fact that he's not mentioning Article 14. Article 14 played a major role with some of the best lifters, like he mentioned, Austin Perkins and other lifters being in the USAPL and not being able to compete in IPF. Why? Because of the dual recognition. You are not allowed to compete in an expelled or suspended federation if you are in the IPF, and if you do, you are suspended. So therefore, a lot of lifters were unable to compete because of that rule. The USAPL did not make that rule. The IPF did. So therefore, you can't blame them for ruining the sport when they made a rule that didn't allow these guys to come over and go back and forth, right? And I've always find it ironic when we talk about Article 14 when it comes to drug testing, because of the fact that that's a main reason why Article 14 is there, because we don't want a lifter that's considered untested in the federation, right? When the USAPL has prioritized drug testing. So that's my first rebuttal on what he had to say, and let's get to the next one. So the next point that he brought up was that the USAPL led to confusion because they changed their weight classes. And so if you don't know, that the USAPL uses 90, 100, 110, 125 kilo weight classes. And obviously there's ones underneath 82.5. So the IPF has different weight classes. That was a change that happened in 2012 when powerlifting went raw for the most part, right? And those weight classes that the USAPL uses are the old ones that they use from, I believe, 1973, 2010, 2011. So with that being said, I think my rebuttal to that is, I think it's not fair to say that it causes confusion when we clearly have things like GO points and dot scores to determine if someone is a good lifter or not, right? So if you have a 67.5 kilo lifter and you compare them to a 105 kilo lifter, you can very well tell who's the better power lifter based off their GO points, right? I think that's very obvious and that's very clear, and it's something that we don't really need much discussion on or have much confusion on, because we know, like, when we say who's the best power lifter in the world, usually it's going off of GO points or dot score, right? When we determine who wins a competition, it's usually based off of GO points or dot score. So I find that confusing. And also, if I'm not mistaken, the records that were held in the USAPL when they were in the IPF, are those not the intellectual property of the IPF? If I'm wrong, ignore this, but if they are, wouldn't they take those records and then the USAPL want to maybe differentiate themselves on trying to be a shadow version of the IPF and try to differentiate themselves in that way by having different weight classes? I don't know, maybe that's just a thought I thought of, but moving forward to the next point. So the next point that he brought up was the fact that the USAPL also made it confusing for fans in terms of the pathway, right? So when it comes to, like, for example, the IPF, you have like local meets, you have your nationals, you have your worlds, you have Sheffield, right? And so everybody there, what he said was that's a simple way of doing it, versus the USAPL, who has states, regionals, nationals, and pro series, right? And I always find it interesting that you say that, because, well, I found that interesting that you said that because of the fact that Sheffield is a very, very interesting competition, right? So number one, when it comes to Sheffield, it's the highest level. I do understand that, but my issue with it is that it kind of takes away from other competitions that people would compete in. So for example, we look at nationals. right? Or look at worlds. Why is it that we're on the world stage with all countries across the world, but lifters are not going full throttle, right? They're saving themselves for a competition that's going to happen in January when they're competing in June, right? Does that make sense? I don't think so, right? So you're looking at a lift and you go, okay, this guy's going to break a world record. No, he's not going to do it today because of the fact that he's trying to save it so he doesn't break the world record, right? I also find it ironic that you say Pro Series is confusing when it's basically an exhibition, similar to how the Sheffield is, but also I don't think it's that confusing either with Pro Series. We're talking about Sheffield, who the way you win is not how we record winning in powerlifting. It's based off of breaking the world record. So if I were to watch powerlifting as someone who's getting into it and say, okay, this is how we keep score, and then I watch Sheffield and see Austin Perkins be the best lifter and then he doesn't win, I'm lost. How did he lose, right? That doesn't make sense to me, and that's very confusing for a new powerlifting fan. So when you say the confusing, I just don't think that makes any sense at all, because Sheffield is super confusing. So with that being said, I just kind of think that point is moot if you're going to say that Pro Series are confusing, but Sheffield isn't. I don't know. Next, we have the point about drug testing being something that you wouldn't basically sacrifice. You would sacrifice drug testing in order to have the top of the top competition, right? And I may be saying that incorrectly, but you more said that if slightly better drug testing, let me rephrase that, slightly better drug testing compared to better competition at the top, right? And I think you're downplaying the level of drug testing that the USAPL does. If you look at what they do during their competitions, the lifter that is being drug tested gets drug tested as soon as they get off the platform after the last deadlift. So there is a level of drug testing they cannot escape, right? There is planning that you can kind of do around the way the IPF tests, right? And this is not a discredit or diss to the USAPL or IPF. This is just something that I noticed. It's a different method that I think can be avoided, or you can kind of dance around how they do their drug testing compared to what the USAPL does, right? With that being said, I think it's really important to say, if you're going to downplay the drug testing, you have to talk about how big it is for a podium level world lifter to get to worlds, get on the podium while they're on trend. That is massive. That is a discredit and a degradation to the sport, because you talked about the way the USAPL was degrading the sport. This guy is there regularly. How is this guy able to compete? And it's not a huge deal that he got drug tested, or let's not say not a huge deal, because that's not what you said, but it's not something that, you would think that would be a major thing they have to really fix, or maybe go to the method that the USAPL is doing. I don't know, maybe that makes more sense to me. But also, let's add this piece. If you're going to talk about Article 14, right? Right? Article 14 is something that the IPF instilled because they didn't want untested lifters in their federation. Then why would you downplay how the USAPL promotes drug testing, right? So I have a lot of confusion about that one too. But moving forward, and my last thing that I want to talk about is your point about you care more about the top of the sport and how the local level, you don't really care about that, right? And I say to this, I'm asking this question: do you care about the growth of the sport? If you don't, that's fine. I'm not saying you don't, but I'm asking this question because if you want to see powerlifting grow, if you want to see powerlifting become an Olympic sport, if you want to see our top level powerlifters making tons of money, you have to have good level grassroots, right? You have to have quality grassroots. You have to have fairness at that point. You have to have great competitions, great meets. And I think that the USAPL does a great job of the local level meet, right? And so that's really important. Let's think about it like this too, right? So in the United States, we have a thing called AAU, right? Everybody knows what AAU is. It's also known as grassroots basketball, right? And so with these AAU programs, if they're not a sponsored team, usually how it works is They have an elite team, right? You have the best of the program. But how does that team get funded? By the B, the C, and the D team, right? These people are paying for their kids to play. The elite team basically pays nothing, right? And so with that being said, if you don't have that, the sport can't grow, right? If you don't have the local meets and really care about those meets growing. Like, I know you're a spectator. I know you just like to see the best of the best compete, but you also have to understand, like, even myself, like, I care about the sport so much that I created my own program at my school that I teach at here, where I coach athletes at my gym that I train at, Urban Powerhouse. And so with that being said, I would ask you, and I would say, because I think you're a big advocate of the sport, to understand that the issue with you saying so what to the importance of the local level meet, right? But to conclude, I think that you made your points, but I think, yes, it's from a spectator point. Like, this is what you want to see, but we have to also think about the growth of the sport so that the quality of powerlifting gets better and the talent that comes into powerlifting continues to grow. Because if more talent comes in, we're going to see more amazing numbers. And as a spectator, I would love to see that, right? We'll see a 93 hit 1,000 kilos, right? We'll see 83s hitting 900 plus, right? So I would love to see that myself. So I would advise you, and just someone who's also a fan of the sport and someone who's a fan of your work, to really think about the fact that you said, so what, when it comes to the local level. But that's all I got. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you watch this. And like I said, I appreciate your work. I appreciate your videos and your content. You're amazing. But I just wanted to challenge you on a friendly, just discussion. But peace.